Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Well, Lloyd, it looks like you had some long conversations yesterday. Your emails.
Yes. They were good though.
Yeah.
All part of the process.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we'll give it another minute or two. All right, it's 10:03 a.m. I will go ahead and call us to order. Welcome, everybody, to September's Performance Management Subcommittee meeting. We have quite a bit to do today. Most of our agenda is going to be focused around updates on the 3 different scoring processes. And of course, a number of you on the call today have been part of that. Before we jump into that, first thing we'll take a look at is the minutes. From last meeting, we did get some good feedback on what would be a little bit more helpful in terms of minutes. And so Shay and I have traded some emails, and we're going to try to move things toward a more action-oriented minutes. I think it'll be easier for you all to read, and certainly Shay, being our new vice chair, her duties are going to increase. So I think it will also make things a little easier for her, as well as our dedicated secretary. I don't have June's minutes with the corrections that we talked about yet, so those are still being worked on, but we do have August minutes. If you all would like to take a moment to take a look and see if there's anything that needs to be corrected.
I motion to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion from Danielle to approve the minutes from the August 11th meeting. Do we have a second?
I can second it. If you don't mind just updating the spelling of my last name.
Okay. How should your last name be spelled?
Kinard.
D or T?
Uh-huh.
Did you say D or
D
T?
is in Delta.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I have it spelled with a D in there. Is there a spot that I missed?
It looks like there's a T on my copy.
Okay,
Where it says approval of minutes, it says KINNART.
got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's
No
get,
worries. Thank you.
okay. All right, so we have one spelling correction. And
And I'm okay to second the approval.
okay, and a second from Shay Kennard. Any other corrections? Okay, let's go ahead and vote in the chat. Okay, excellent. Looks like motion carries. Motion carries. Minutes are adopted. Okay, so now to move into the meat and bones of today's meeting. As I said, we have 3 scoring processes we need to have updates on. The one that I suspect we will probably spend most of our time on is the ESG project scoring. And so, you know, 4 of the 5 of us who are on that panel are here in the meeting today. I'm hoping Tracy, who's our 5th, can make it here as well. But anyway, to start things off, Lloyd, if you want to maybe kind of summarize kind of where we're at. I know you sent out an email this morning. Go ahead and summarize where we're at and kind of what needs to happen at this point.
Jonathan, good morning, everyone. Lloyd Schmeidler with the Community Development Department. Jonathan, you're specifically asking about where we're at with the state ESG?
Correct, because we have some unfinished business with that particular panel.
Yes, okay. Yes, so the COC received 4 applications from 4 different organizations for portions of the state ESG competition funding. $172,255 is available to Durham. Of that amount, $68,903 must be spent on housing stabilization activities, which includes homeless prevention, rapid rehousing, or HMIS or comparable database activities. The remainder, 103,000 some odd dollars, may be spent on emergency services, which includes street outreach and emergency shelter services and operations. After scoring the 4 applications, one applicant, Housing for New Hope, requested funding for 2 different activities, one for some funds for street outreach activities and a portion for rapid rehousing activities, which would go towards the 68,903. The scoring committee, after considering the applications and scoring them, agreed to recommend families moving forward for $51,677 for emergency shelter operations, to recommend Housing for New Hope for $27,905 for street outreach activities, and to recommend Open Table Ministries for $23,771. There was significant competition for this portion of the funds, as together the three organizations had applied for approximately $244,000, which was substantially more than was available to be distributed. On the housing stabilization portion, that we need to use at least 40% of the state's allocation for housing stabilization activities. Conversely, the two organizations that applied, Housing for New Hope and the Durham Crisis Response Center, did not apply for all of the funds that must be used for rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, or HMIS, or comparable database implementation. However, we did follow up with Housing for New Hope's Executive Director, Russell Pierce, and he indicated that Housing for New Hope, if it's the will of the committee, would be able to increase its project budget to cover the difference between what was not applied for initially and the $68,903. And the committee at this point, and it's up to Jonathan as to how he wants to proceed, the committee has not yet made recommendations for funding for that $68,903.
Okay. All right, Lloyd, thanks for the summary. So essentially, scoring panel and rest of the committee, where we're at is we have to kind of decide what to do with that last piece of funding. We are restricted by the state on that particular amount, the 68,000. We have to spend a minimum of that. And so what it comes down to for us to decide is whether or not we want to make a recommendation that both DCRC and Housing for New Hope both be recommended for funding, or if we just want to recommend one. There were definitely concerns raised about the quality of DCRC's application. So we do, we have yet to kind of hash that out. But of course, as we were going over as a panel a couple of days ago, we didn't necessarily have all the information and asked Lloyd to have some follow-up conversations. So the floor is open for further discussion on this. Do we want to recommend only Housing for New Hope and for the full amount? Do we want to recommend Housing for New Hope and DCRC? What are everyone's thoughts at this point?
I think it'll be nice to be able to support both organizations. I think they both have programs that deserve support. So it would be nice to be able to split what we have, with them to be able to support them. Again, I think I stood strong on just making sure that the other company that was looking for the $10,000 for their database, I'm just not willing to support that. But other than that, we can totally split it, whatever the team is feeling.
Okay, thank you, Shay, for your thoughts there. So it sounds like you're in favor of supporting both.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I'll just share what I shared as one of the scoring members, as somebody who has previously applied for ESG funding. I just felt I couldn't support DCRC's application because of the quality of it. There was a lot of things that were left incomplete and missing. And so, I mean, just based on that, I wasn't willing to support that, the funding for that program, for the database.
Thank you, Danielle, for your thoughts there.
Jonathan, if I could chime in for
Sure.
provide some additional background for the members of the committee that were not part of the scoring committee. So the two applications for this 68,000 initially were Durham Crisis Response Center applying for $10,000 to help them migrate data to a HMIS comparable database. They're in the process of setting up Osnium as a comparable database for all of their projects. Housing for New Hope initially applied for $46,250 for rapid rehousing activities, and that would be divided both between services and financial assistance. So together that was about $56,250, which was about $12,000 short of the 68,903 that is available under the housing stabilization portion of the state ESG. Thanks.
Thank you, Lloyd. And just to refresh my memory, if I'm remembering correctly, DCRC scored 58% on their application, correct? Average.
My recollection was that it was at 63%. Let me bring up the score sheet.
Lloyd, if I can chime in for a moment.
Sure.
So a little bit of background on Osnium and DCRC for what it's worth. DCRC currently has HUD COC funded projects, and this database, in theory, should have been up and running several years ago. And they're looking for some additional funding starting in October of this year. They've got state funding that this database is supposed to be used for. The last I spoke with DCRC, they weren't talking about migrating all of their previous year's data into this system. They were going to pick a go forward date and start using it from that date forward to avoid having some level of try and have better data quality doing that. And the system has to be in place, up and running, in order to receive city funds that should start October 1st. And these funds won't be available until calendar year 2023, which is going to make it difficult to go back and you can't reimburse yourself for expenses that happened in this year with this contract. So those are things just to keep in mind as you go through the discussion.
So you're saying this system has to be in place by October 1 to get the funding that they're
that the city is basically, they've got to be able to report on the money that we're giving them for non-congregate shelter, and they have to report to HUD for the current grant year that they're finishing out their rapid rehousing project that ends in 2023. So this system has to be in place now. And in theory, it should have been in place, 3 years ago. They had spent, I don't know how much time working on a custom database that they were trying to build and do it, but it wasn't going to ever meet the HUD specifications to qualify. So now they're in this. There is a new executive director and a new grant writer / development person. So this is their 4th executive director in 3 years.
okay. And Lloyd, did you raise your hand, Lloyd?
I did. I just wanted to add that I checked the score sheet, and the average score for the DCRC application was 62.5% of available points, and that the closest other application scored that is recommended for fundings was Open Table Ministries, which scored at 73.5%. So they were about 11 points below that application score.
And my question, Lloyd, is did you get the sense from Housing for New Hope that they were, excited about the possibility of additional funds if we asked them to apply for it, or was there sort of some ambivalence there? I didn't get the sense from you that they were terribly excited about it, but
Yeah, they are not terribly excited about it. They have acknowledged both orally and in their applications for continuum of care funds that it's increasingly difficult for their rapid rehousing case managers to find landlords willing to rent units without at least a commitment to provide a year-long rental subsidy. And of course, rapid rehousing subsidies are intended to be short to medium-term rent assistance and only provide as much rent assistance as is needed. But rapid rehousing funds are not intended to, at least initially, provide a commitment to the landlord or to the tenant that at least 12 months of rent assistance is guaranteed. So they're willing to take the entire 68,903 if that's the recommendation of the HSAC, which is looking to this committee for funding recommendations to consider, but they would not be terribly excited about it at the same time.
Sally, do you have any thoughts at this point? And of course, Tracy has just joined us as well. So, would love to hear, from either of you about what your thoughts are at this point.
And that's specifically around DCRC. I mean, it seems like that if they need to have the system up and running now and the funds aren't available until later and it's not a strong application, I don't see why to move forward with it.
Okay, sorry. So my audio is a little rough. It sounds like you were not in support of their application.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I'm sorry, this is Tracy. Good morning. I had some tech issues and for the past hour trying to log onto our system to log on to this meeting. But I kind of got the tail end of what Lloyd and Colin were discussing about, I think, the organization. So did we hear back from them based on the follow-up questions we had?
So Lloyd did hear back, and he sent out an email this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to check it out, but essentially, you know what, Lloyd, I'm going to let you summarize because I'm afraid I'm gonna
Yeah, I would
summarize
say,
incorrectly.
Yeah, I would say there were some inconsistencies within the application relative to that I think members of the committee picked up on, in that they're saying that Osnium would be up and running by October 1st, but on the other hand, this application is only for funding in calendar year 2023. They also indicated that that a substantial portion, up to $8,000, would be used to migrate data from existing programs to Osnium, where in other conversations, the organization has indicated to Colin, at least, as he shared earlier, that their intentions were simply to stand up Osnium and then begin using it from date certain forward to for new clients and not necessarily to go back and upload data from existing programs or projects. So my conversation with Shay Lloyd, the grant writer who submitted the grant, suggested that everybody who was involved at DCRC in putting the application together perhaps themselves were not on the same page as to exactly what they were planning to apply for and how they intended to use the funds. They were clear that Ms. Lloyd was clear that the organization does need to get OSNIUM operational. They have 20 full-time employees and 18 part-time employees, and the intention would be that all 38 employees would be using OSNIUM in some way for their client database activities. They acknowledge that it is a need. They did not, Ms. Lloyd, being a new employee, I think she started in June with the organization, does not have a sense for the history of why DCRC assured the COC in 2018 when it first applied for COC funds and received a domestic violence bonus project, and assured the COC and HUD that it would have a comparable database operational by the time that project started implementation. Why 4 years later they still don't have an operating database that is comparable to an HMIS. Ms. Lloyd indicated that if DCRC is not funded through this grant opportunity, they would continue to pursue other grant opportunities that they do not have apparently have identified. They have not yet identified other funds to actually implement the use of OSNIUM.
I have a question about the process on the state end. Like, I know that the COC makes the determinations and then submits the whole regional application with all the individual applications. But is there a chance that if they don't improve the quality of that application, that Durham could lose that amount of funding?
If that's directed to me, I would say yes, there is a chance. Durham recommended an organization for funding with state ESG funds about 5 or 6 years ago. And that organization did not pass the state's threshold review or scoring review and was not funded. Gratefully, Durham only lost that funding for that particular year, and it was not an ongoing loss of state ESG funds.
Thank you.
Another question I have, I feel a bit torn in making this decision because, I think if Housing for New Hope was, super ecstatic about getting more funds, I think it would be kind of an easy decision given the deficiencies of the DCRC application. So the question I'm going to ask is more bigger picture. What is in the best interest of the larger COC? I mean, is it to give DCRC a chance to get help getting this, this OSNIUM, up and running with ESG funds? I mean, it sounds like funding next year is contingent upon it. Or is it in the better interest of the COC that we recommend a project that's likely to get all the funding? Lloyd, could either you or Colin, do you have any insights on that?
One of the things I was just sitting here thinking about this for a moment is that we also need to be mindful of the optics and potential precedent that could be set with any decisions that are made. Is, you've got on one hand, funding a database. Funding a database helps no one experiencing homelessness. It tracks some data, it pays a vendor, $10,000, staff time, whatever. It pays a lot of stuff, which is great. Nothing wrong with doing that. It also means that we go to HSAC and there's going to be questions that'll come up like, why are we paying for a database when we've got a growing number of unsheltered people on the streets and nowhere to go? And while Housing for New Hope may not be real excited about applying for rapid rehousing, not that US, the funds don't necessarily have to go to paying rents. If we can't find landlords to take the rents, those funds could be used for case management and supportive services, which is another big thing that we've been hearing from landlords and from providers, is that, the supportive services are equally important. And that's something to be mindful of, are we going to fund people? Are we going to find this? And then if you fund this, generally speaking, people are going to keep coming back to the same well. So next year, this could be one of those, in perpetuity requests that will have to be weighed and decided, are we going to be funding this? Or what if there's another organization out there that needs a database and next year they want to apply and say, hey, pay for our database, pay for our database. Just things to think through as you weigh your decisions. And I'm not trying to push one way or another. I'm just trying to think through pros, cons, and potential concerns that HSAC members or others in the community may raise. And that, we just need to be prepared to answer the question and say, well, we chose a database because landlords aren't accepting money, and that's what we needed to do now. And that's perfectly acceptable. Or we chose to put more money in rapid rehousing, knowing that it's going to pay staff salaries instead of rents, because that's what's needed. And I don't know what the right answer is. It's, we just need to have a good logic and a rationale for what we do. And we really want to put forth the strongest application we can to the state that shows that we're using this money wisely to meet the needs that we have identified in the application. And we want to show congruency to that as well.
Well, I had a chance to kind of click over while listening to read the email from Lloyd. It kind of seems as if you're alluding to there's some level of risk of funding the database, the funding for the crisis center because of their ability or capacity, maybe staffing capacity, to be able to implement this in a timely manner. Is that what I kind of, that's what I gleaned from your email. There's concerns there.
Well, there's an inconsistency in the application itself and in the information that we received in the application, insofar as the application says they need the funding to get Osnium set up by October 1, 2022. But certainly project applications are only awarded funding for activities completed in calendar year 2023. I have indicated to Ms. Lloyd that if DCRC is recommended for funding, we would make some effort to try to provide some technical assistance to improve their application before it is finally submitted to the state by the October 3rd deadline.
All right, I think I'm able to give my thoughts at this point. I think at this point, my inclination would be to not support funding DCRC and to support full funding for Housing for New Hope. Everybody's comments has kind of helped me kind of think through a little more, so I appreciate what everybody has said. the other thing that I have not mentioned yet, which we have set the bar for a passing project that I believe it's 65%. And, along the lines of optics, having to, explain to HSAC why we would recommend a project that is, would be considered a failing project. We'd be talking about, an improvement plan if they were a project that was continuously funded. So I think in the end, I think it makes sense to recommend Housing for New Hope for the full funding.
Agree.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that, and having the full amount under the housing stabilization for Housing for New Hope, because under the emergency services, we wouldn't be able to provide them with the full amount they've requested in their grant application.
Any other thoughts on this? Well, what I would suggest at this point is that one member of the scoring panel will take a vote based on just the scoring panel alone. If somebody would make a motion to, if the group agrees with that, to recommend that Housing for New Hope be awarded, the full funding amount.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Danielle Butler to award the full
I
funding.
second that.
And seconded by Tracy. Any further discussion? And if we're going to vote in the chat box, which recommend. Okay. All right. So it looks like, and Shay, did you want to vote? Okay. All right, Shay's voted as well. All right, so motion carries, and we have decided that piece of business. Thank you for everybody on that panel. A lot of applications, a lot of discussion, and a very hard decision, no doubt. All right, so we're going to keep moving here on to the next update, which will be the COC NOFO scoring process. And Lloyd, if you want to give us an update on that one as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Let me share my, let me ask in reference to the previous vote, is it the understanding of you as chair and the committee that these recommendations then are being approved by performance management and going forward to the HSAC with the endorsement of the performance management committee, or is that still to come in today's meeting?
So what I was going to do is, once we get through the rest of the scoring panel updates, to call a vote, in case we need to, in case we're ready to recommend, other scoring results. If you do not think we're going to be at a point to do that with those other two, we can vote as a committee and have Shantae and Janine vote as well to have the full recommendation of the committee.
All right, thanks for that clarification. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. I've tried to share it. Now, if I can get to where I want to. I've written some things about the state, not the state, but the COC competition. Here we go. So the current, for the annual COC competition, the total funding available including the domestic violence bonus project and a permanent housing bonus project, is $2,207,958. Of that amount, Tier 1 funding is $1,803,687. Tier 1, for those who are not all that familiar with HUD's distinctions between Tier 1 and Tier 2 funding, is generally that Tier 1 funding is more or less assured as long as the projects being recommended under Tier 1 pass HUD's thresholds and their review process for an eligible project. Tier 1 funding typically has included our HMIS projects. We do use 55,000 of our annual COC funds to support the HMIS implementation of the entire COC. And then generally, as much as possible, we include renewal projects under Tier 1 because we value having continued funding for those projects. This year, different than last year, in which Tier 1 funding was equal to the amount of funding needed to renew all of the eligible renewal projects. This year, Tier 1 funding is only 95% of the funds that are needed to renew all of the eligible projects. Tier 2 funding then is the difference between those two amounts, or $404,000 and some odd dollars. However, with 2 projects in Durham being reallocated, we only have 10 renewals applying for renewal funding. So if we put all of those 10 renewals into Tier 1, we would still have $218,013 available under Tier 1 for new projects. That $218,000 is the difference between $1,803,000 and the $1,585,000. And then an additional Tier 2 funding of $404,000 leaves $622,284 available to recommend to HUD for new projects, realizing that projects that are recommended under Tier 2 and ranked in Tier 2 are less likely to be funded by HUD than Tier 1 projects. So with that as background, then in the initial phase for acceptance of full project applications, we had only really one project, the Streets to Home expansion, asking for $94,664 that was received by the department in the scoring committee by the August 31st deadline. Families Moving Forward had been approved for submitting a project for the domestic violence bonus. However, they had technical difficulties completing the application in eSNAPs as is required by the Durham COC. And so they still, to this point, have not, based on communication earlier in the morning, still have not completed the application in eSNAPs, and we do not have a copy of that. Realizing that we had more funding available than we had applied for, even between those 2 projects, that's just slightly over $300,000. Last week, the department called for an emergency meeting of our existing renewal projects, with the exception of the LGBTQ Center, which has not yet started its implementation of the domestic violence bonus project that it received funding for in last year's competition. But we solicited additional interest in the funds that are available under Tier 1 and Tier 2. By late yesterday, we had received interest from Urban Ministries to apply to expand the Fresh Start project, which is rapid rehousing for people with long histories or chronic homelessness, and expansions of William Square and Andover apartments, which are sponsored by Housing for New Hope, with equal amounts of 108,000. So with those 5 potential projects being proposed, the total of these projects is 660,657, which is $38,000 over the funding available for a new project. So we could not recommend all 5 of these for these amounts, and get everybody in under tier 2. That said, it's also important to keep in mind that domestic violence bonus projects have 2 opportunities to obtain COC funds. The first pass is if they are approved as a domestic violence bonus project for over $50 million that HUD has set aside specifically for domestic violence bonus projects. If the DV bonus project does not win funding in that competition, it would take its place in the regular competition. So for example, if we would put Families Moving Forward's bonus project under tier 1, again, there's $218,000 available under tier 1 for new projects. If the DV bonus project took that position, then less than $6,000 would be remain available under tier 1 for the next ranked project. However, if say, as in this list here, Streets to Home 1 expansion was ranked under tier 1, we would still have a portion in the DV bonus. If that were ranked following that, there would still be a substantial portion of the domestic violence bonus that could be awarded funding under tier 1.
Lloyd, Sally's got a question.
Okay.
I mean, you can finish. I'm just wondering, and Lloyd, you may know what my question is.
Well, I don't.
So what I hear you saying is that there were insufficient projects proposed for the amount of available funding. So you reached out to agencies to ask them to apply for funding, but I don't even know what to say. But you rejected our application, our pre-application, which meant that we weren't even eligible to apply.
Well, Sally, we can have a discussion about that within the confines of the committee if you wish. I
mean, we can discuss it later. I'm just,
the department gave Project Access the same opportunity to be approved to participate in the annual competition as we gave other organizations. And we gave you the information, and the Project Access had 2 opportunities to provide the documentation that was being asked for in the pre-application period. And for what you were not, did not provide the documentation.
We have other agenda items, but I would like to take this up again in another context or forum.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. So currently we can, I think I don't know if Colin agrees, but generally my approach would be that at least in terms of the project ranking, the 10 the 10 renewal projects would be ranked in the order of scoring, with the exceptions of our HMIS project, as is standard practice according to our monitoring, ranking and evaluation policy. Our HMIS project is ranked number 1. New projects that have not yet begun implementation are ranked immediately below that. So the LGBTQ Centers project would be ranked 2nd. And then the other renewal projects, which are all permanent housing projects, would be ranked in the order of their scoring. Again, the ranking of projects under tier 1 is not all that significant until projects are ranked on the line that straddles tier 1 and tier 2. And HUD is clear in the NOFO that if it determines that a project would not have enough funding available under tier 1 to implement a meaningful project, it would not fund the entire project. However, sometimes HUD also has enough funding to take some monies under tier 2 and fund projects that straddle the tier 1 and tier 2 line. And I believe we've had a number of projects that have straddled the line that have received both their tier 1 and tier 2 funding.
Questions. Wood, can you say again the difference between tier 1 and tier 2? I know you said tier 1 those are kind of like well, go ahead and if you could just restate again.
Tier 1 funding is generally assured to the COC as long as the recommended projects meet kind of HUD's standard review of eligible project. Tier 2 funding is less certain. It really depends on how well our overall collaborative application scores in comparison to other COCs, so that in awarding tier 2 funds, HUD takes the highest scoring collaborative application and awards projects to that COC, and then it moves down the list of COCs in the order of their collaborative application score and awards tier 2 projects until funding runs out. So in previous years, Durham has not scored well enough on the collaborative application. Not that we haven't tried, but we haven't scored well enough to obtain substantial tier 2 funding.
And having, being sitting on all 3 of the scoring panels and trying to keep all the dates together, when are we going to be anticipate as a committee looking at the sort of the final results?
Well, obviously we had hoped to have funding recommendations for the Performance Management Committee today. I guess it's up to the scoring committee as to so the deadline for letting projects know whether they're going to be recommended for funding is September 15th. So we need decisions made by at the HSAC meeting on September 14th. So if I think the key recommendations for the committee, I've scrolled up to the deadlines here. The HUD deadlines for submission of our annual COC and NOFO are September 30th. We also should take a little time in today's meeting to talk about the supplemental NOFO and that application, although we don't have competition for that funding. So it's up to the scoring committee as to how it wants to proceed with determining what order to rank these latest projects.
Okay. So that committee would be you, me, or Shay, Danielle, and myself.
Correct.
And
Sorry, everyone, my computer is going in and out. What was your question? My apologies.
So I'm just trying to kind of get a timeline here. I don't think the three of us have had a chance to see this yet, but I know you did send out yesterday the descriptions. So it seems like perhaps the three of us as the panel probably ought to take some time to look at this, I'm thinking.
I agree.
And I know, when we do the COC competition, usually there's sort of this Excel box, showing kind of the rankings. Do you by chance have anything prepared like that yet, Lloyd? I mean, because I know you all, you score them and then, and Lloyd, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Jonathan. We have not finalized the scoring and proposed rankings of the permanent housing renewals as a department. We have tentative rankings of those renewal projects, but we haven't finalized our scores for them. The ranking of the scoring and ranking of the other projects, the new project applications, I think with the limited information we have from these 5 projects, it's going to be difficult to probably evaluate them beyond some kind of subjective review of the limited information that organizations have provided.
Okay, so it sounds like what you have for us is what you have at this point. And that in reaching out and encouraging folks to apply for more, we don't have the full applications yet.
We don't have the applications from ESAPs. We have brief project descriptions for the last 3. I think the information we have about the domestic violence bonus might have come from the initial, the pre-application, in which their project was described briefly. But we don't have the ESAP's application from the domestic violence bonus project either.
Okay. And so essentially the need is that this needs to come before HSAC next week.
That's correct. Yeah, we need
Okay. So I'm thinking at this point, I know it's Thursday, the HSAC meeting is Wednesday. Have you all scored the 10 renewals?
Again, we've not completed that review. We're going to get together this afternoon to finalize scores for those. We have tentative scores, but we haven't finalized them.
Okay.
So we'll have a ranking for the renewals by the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to think through this on the spot. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, that it would be at least good for the scoring panel to, have a little more to kind of work with here. And I know you don't have a lot either. Because I'm not sure what we could evaluate at this point. And maybe the evaluation is that we're, recommending the renewals, provided that there's no, that nothing falls below the, the minimum threshold where we have to look at a performance improvement plan. We can also, if you're able to, if you all as the department are able to get a little bit more, perhaps Danielle and Shay and myself, we can do an email review or vote, or potentially even, depending on what everyone's schedule is looking like, potentially set up a, another meeting. So it sounds like really what you're going to need guidance on is the ranking of the tier 2.
Well, there's several important decisions. There's a decision as to confirmation, perhaps, of a decision that since Streets to Home 1 expansion was the only application that really was received by the deadline with all the information that was requested, that be ranked at the top of the new projects. After that, in my mind, it's pretty wide open as to which of the projects get ranked under that. Whatever project is ranked next would have a substantial portion of it still under tier 1, and would likely be funded under tier 1. The remainder would be in tier 2 and would be at greater risk of not being funded. And then, obviously the other projects could be ranked under tier 2, with 38,000 being over the amount of funding available. We could potentially, if William Square and Andover are we can either ask Fresh Start to reduce its budget by 38,373, or ask William Square and Andover to reduce each of those project expansion budgets by 19,000 to bring the budgets within the available funding. But then you still have the issues of, okay, if you start with Streets to Home 1 being the highest ranked new project, what is next? And what is after that? What is after that? And what is after that?
Okay.
And that's where I think the scoring committee probably needs to have some discussion based on the limited information we have. And I think at this late date, we're not anticipating getting a lot more information between now and September 14th about these projects, perhaps with the exception of the DV bonus project. But even there, how families moving forward has indicated that they've not completed the application in ESNAPs, although they're making progress.
Okay. Let's do this. Because I do want to make sure we get the NOFO. Is there, and I don't want to create, I realize that you also are your resources are limited. Is there any way that you could generate a sort of recommendation on the ranking, as the lead agency, and at least that would give the three of us something to work from to discuss. And then perhaps, I don't know if we, depending on how much discussion we feel is needed, if we can turn around a quick meeting, either tomorrow or Monday, I don't want to speak for Danielle and Shay what their time looks like, but at least some sort of kind of recommendation that we can work from to kind of discuss, you know, and review based on what you have.
That's a call that Colin can make since he's my boss.
Okay, I think he stepped off for another meeting.
Oh, did he? Okay, well, then I would say we'll discuss it as if that's your request, we'll discuss it as the homeless team and try to get rankings of the new projects recommended to you by the end of the day tomorrow or first thing Monday morning.
Okay, so it may look like we may just have to do an email vote, or maybe, I mean, the other thing too is, and I realize like it's, you know, you all are kind of in a tough spot too, you just don't have much to give us.
Yeah, what we have to give you are primarily, with the exception, I can get more information about the DB bonus project, I think, from the application and Zoom grants, but the other three applications, what we have is what has already been sent to the scoring committee.
Okay, so Danielle and Shay have both said that their Friday afternoons are looking really good. Mine is looking good. You know, if we were to convene tomorrow afternoon, say, I don't know, 3 o'clock, is that enough time for you all to put together what you have?
Well, 3 o'clock generally is not good for us. We've got the standing team meeting at 3. We potentially, I think, could do something earlier in the afternoon, but and we'll see how far we get on
Okay.
on the funding rankings by then.
I mean, maybe we could do something tentatively at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. And even if you don't have everything, I mean, I mean, I don't want to, I also, you know, there's more, you know, the full committee is here, you know, as best they can be. So, you know, I think if we can, you know, convene as the scoring panel, you know, tomorrow afternoon, we can go into these issues more in depth. And even if you all don't have, you know, everything, perhaps we can make a recommendation, you know, tomorrow.
Okay.
Does that work for you all, Danielle and Shay? All right, cool. So if Lloyd, if you want to send out an email invite for a digital meeting, 2 o'clock tomorrow, and then we can convene then.
Okay.
And then with that being said, we can go ahead and move on to the NOFO and round out our meeting with that today.
All right. So thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. On the supplemental NOFO, we had 2 applications, one from Housing for New Hope and the second from a newer organization named A&P Smith Community Development Corporation. And the A&P Community Development Corporation did not satisfactorily meet the threshold requirements, so that it's a new organization doing some limited street outreach in East Durham, I think primarily on Sundays after church services, but they are very interested in becoming more active. They've expressed interest in participating in the HMIS and joining more work to help get unsheltered people off the streets and into housing. And we're beginning a process of providing technical assistance to them about the requirements of HUD relative to street outreach and you know, the definition of unsheltered homelessness and homelessness in general, as well as helping get them stood up in the HMIS. So the other project was essentially to fund existing street outreach work at Housing for New Hope and to allow the current funding that the city has been providing for the last at least 2 years to Housing for New Hope for street outreach activities to be used for permanent housing subsidies, perhaps, or other supportive services for people experiencing homelessness in the community. The funding available for the supplemental NOFO is $2,062,266, but that is for a 3-year period. So in any 1 year, the annual amount would be about 687,000, I believe. And we are hopeful that Durham will receive funding under this supplemental NOFO. We're working to develop a good collaborative application. I think some good things are happening in Durham relative to efforts to address unsheltered homelessness between the street outreach team at Housing for New Hope, as well as Open Table Ministries downtown, plus now the A&P Smith work they're doing. So I think we can make a strong case to HUD, and we've got good community partnerships. The areas where we need to work on are leveraging housing resources and leveraging healthcare resources to support our efforts to provide more housing opportunities for people experiencing homelessness, including the unsheltered. So with only one really competitive application, we don't have much work for the committee to do in terms of deciding which projects to rank.
Yeah, and I will just add, and again, committee, I'm sorry about my audio. There's something going on, and I apologize if I'm generating any excess noise. I'll try to keep it to a minimum. We did have 2 applications, as Lloyd said, for the NOFO, and one was just very weak. Unfortunately, we do want to be encouraging and hope that the organization A&P Smith will continue to be involved with the COC, but the panel did not feel like they could support the application, and that we needed to support Housing for New Hope's application. So I just wanted to add those thoughts and open the floor for any other questions.
Yeah, this is Tracy. I just had a quick clarifying question. This is for the supplemental NOFO funds, Lloyd?
Yes.
Okay. And so so one of the 2 applications will be recommended for funding, is what you're saying?
Correct. Yes, we are. I think the scoring committee, Jonathan, is recommending that Housing for New Hope develop its application to apply for all of the funding, and that would be the recommendation of the scoring committee as well as performance management for the HSAC's consideration. And that
The reason I'm asking for clarification, does the amount of money under the supplemental, is there a cap at that, like some of the other things, or are they asking fully for the amount that's eligible under that category, or does it really impact any of the other funding requests?
It does not impact the other funding requests, whether you're talking about state ESG or the annual competition, and there's no indication in the NOFO that we're aware of that suggests one organization cannot apply for the entire amount. It should be made clear that the application also does include some community partners that will be collaborating in implementing the project. Subrecipients is the word I was looking for there for a moment. So I think potentially some of the subrecipients may get some funding if this project is awarded. It would be a collaborative project between Housing for New Hope and some subrecipients.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, Lloyd, could you remind us again how much the supplemental NOFO is for?
Supplemental NOFO is a total amount of $2,062,266 over a 3-year period, so about $687,000 a year for 3 years. And after the 3 years, if it's funded, the annual amount would roll into the annual COC competition. What's not clear is whether the annual renewal demand would go up as and would maintain at the annual renewal demand level. For example, if we get 3 years of funding at $680,000 and our annual renewal demand goes up to roughly 2.5 million, is our tier 1 amount in 3 years going to continue to be roughly 1.8 million, and we just end up having a lot of projects under tier 2 that are not funded? That obviously that depends on Congress's funding for HUD and for the homeless programs at HUD. But right now there's funding for the next 3 years should we get funded.
Are there any other questions about the findings of the NOFO supplemental and the recommendation from that panel?
I do have a question because I don't feel like maybe I've scored all of the right parties who submitted the application. Are you able to confirm that, Lloyd? I feel like I did one NOFO, but I don't feel like I've done any other. It's so many scorecards rolling around. I just want to make sure.
We had a meeting of the scoring committee, and I believe we reviewed the scores of the 3
That was
members
the,
of
for
the
the
committee.
NOFO too?
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, okay. So I don't need to turn in anything else. Thank you.
I think you're good.
Yeah, that was the first meeting we had earlier this week.
It was late last week actually, but time is moving fast with a lot of moving parts.
So at this point, if there are no other questions, what I would recommend is that a motion be made from for a committee-wide vote to adopt the recommendations of the scoring panels for ESG and the supplemental NOFO. Obviously the annual competition, which is still being worked on. I do not know that I will be able to bring that before the committee for a full vote due to the timeliness of things and how quickly time is running out. But I do think that it would be helpful if the committee could take a vote on at least the recommendations that have been made for those 2 funding panels.
I make a motion.
Okay. So in that motion, if what I would like to have done is if Lloyd, you could read out the funding recommendation for both the ESG and the supplemental NOFO. That way it'll be recorded for the minutes. And then that way everybody hears it.
Okay. I understand the funding recommendations to be for state ESG funds. Families Moving Forward recommended for $51,677 for emergency shelter operations. Housing for New Hope recommended for $27,905 for street outreach activities and $68,903 for rapid rehousing activities. And Open Table Ministries recommended for $23,771 for street outreach activities. DCRC is not recommended for funding from state ESG. On the supplemental NOFO, the full amount available, which I believe is $2,062,266, is recommended for street outreach activities of Housing for New Hope's application.
All right, that motion has been made by Shay. Thank you, Lloyd, for reading those out. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Danielle Butler. Any further discussion? Let's move to a vote in the chat. The motion is to adopt the funding recommendations as recommended by the ESG panels and NOFO panel as read by Lloyd. And if you'll put your vote in the chat.
I'm able to vote, Lloyd, right? Or should I abstain?
You are an employee of Housing for New Hope, correct?
Yes, I should abstain.
Yeah, you
correct?
should
Okay.
probably abstain.
Okay.
And then Shay, do you want to vote?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you to everybody. I know that was a lot to go over. I am aware that last meeting we went over by about 8 minutes. So I would love to give you 8 minutes back this week. So unless there is, Lloyd, did you raise your hand?
I did raise my hand. Thank you, Jonathan. I want to make one announcement, which is to invite everybody to tomorrow's planning meeting for our community plan to address unsheltered homelessness. That's from this same time, 10 to 11:30 a.m. Whether or not we get funded with the supplemental NOFA really largely will depend on the strength of our COC plan to address unsheltered homelessness. And so we need the community's involvement to help us craft the strongest COC plan to address unsheltered homelessness that we can. So any participation in that meeting would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd, for that announcement. Any other announcements? Okay. I know oh, go ahead, Ruby.
HSAC is next Wednesday. It's the second Wednesday, so just have it on it should be on your calendars. If not, it's on the Durham COC website, and email us at Durham Opening Doors at durhamnc.gov if you don't have the link, and we'll send it out to you. But it is next Wednesday, which is the second Wednesday.
Yeah, and it was moved up this month because of all the work on funding. So that's the reason. I know that we can probably find more things to talk about in the last 7 minutes, but I would love to give that back to you all. So I will call for a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn by Shay, and then a second by anyone.
I second.
All right, thanks, Tracy. So thank you all. We are adjourned. I'll see Shay and Danielle tomorrow, and the rest of you all see you next week at HSAC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.